Recording.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Silver Tent TV.
Hello.
And together we've gathered together to talk about ceremonies and rituals. And if you're in the Silver Tent, you'll be watching this live. And if you're catching it on YouTube, this will be a recording. And there's many more other wise wisdom conversations between women from the Silver Tent in there. So a very warm welcome to you on this autumnal day. And we're actually on two continents. So we've got a few of us from UK, and then we've got a lady that's joined us from the States. And I'm going to invite us to introduce ourselves and share a little bit about who we are, where we are, and also what drew us to this particular conversation, what lights you up about ceremony and ritual. So yeah, let's go for it. Who would like to kick us off?
And that'd be me.
Yeah.
I'm Jackie. I'm in the New Forest in the south of the UK, sort of between Bournemouth and Southampton, for those of you that know the geography, where the ponies run free and the sheep, and I'm always getting stuck in sheep jams and cows in the road and that sort of thing. So it's a lovely place to be. And my role in ceremonies up until this point was purely weddings. I worked for the county council, who in their wisdom terminated my contract. Well, it came to an end. It was a fixed contract, came to an end. And I cried for about 2 days because it was a job that I'd had that I absolutely loved. And then I picked myself up and dusted myself off and thought, right, where do I go from here? So I am now in training as a celebrant, which includes funerals, baby naming, in fact, anything where there's a celebration of life, or a life transition, a change of some sort. And I'm not really a stranger to ritual and ceremony because I have trained as a soul midwife about 10 years ago, which is holding someone's hand through the death process. And of course, it involves lots of ritual, lots of ceremony. There are lots of different stages to dying. So I had a taste of it all then. And my life carried on. I sort of got involved in other projects, and the soul midwifery fell by the wayside. But it's sort of resurfacing again now because I'm looking at all that material with the funeral side of celebrancy. Again, a lot of ritual, a lot of ceremony. So important to say goodbye to that loved one that's going. So that's sort of what, when SUNDY said, well, I like to be part of that, I thought, yeah, actually, that's sort of where I am now. There's a lot around ritual, how important that is. In my experience with the weddings, some of the brides and grooms weren't really interested in the ritual. They wanted us to get the ceremony done in time to pick up the kids at school. But I think as we get older, we realise actually these transitions, these changes are so important. So that's why I thought, yes, I'd like to be part of this, and I can learn lots more. And look, I've got my love jumper on as well, so it's got to be the right day for it. So that's me.
Jackie. Yeah, Jude, did you?
Yeah,
Jude.
yeah, I'm quite happy to go next. So I'm Jude, and I live in Warrington, which is up in the northwest of England, and it's right bang in the middle of Liverpool and Manchester. So there's not a whole lot goes on in Warrington, in my opinion. So if I want, I think I've got Liverpool on one side and Manchester on the other, which is wonderful. Because I'm a village girl at heart. I couldn't like living in the city, but I do like visiting the city. So around 8 years ago, my father died, and he died of dementia. And that was a real journey that I also undertook, as well as my father, because there wasn't a lot of help out there. And I realised, well, don't look outside for help, sort of look inside. And I found I was quite intuitive. in helping him to journey with dementia. And as his death was approaching, I sort of realised that it was down to the family to create around that that ritual and that rite of passage and that transition. And I won't go further into that, but it was a beautiful experience. But from then I became more and more interested in rites of passage. And that led me to train as an end-of-life doula. I'm not sure, Jackie, what the difference is between soul midwifery, probably a complete crossover. We do the same work.
Yeah.
And that also got me ever more interested in ritual as I undertook that training. And very similar to you, Jackie, I'm now in a place where I want to pick that up again, because I haven't done much over the last few years, and I want to pick that up. But grief is coming through strongly for me. And everywhere now I'm seeing grief ceremonies pop up. So important, because we do all have grief, we carry grief. And I've also decided to train to be a grief counsellor as well. So I can use the doula work, the counselling, my knowledge of grief. So when you first said about doing this Zoom call, I was like, yes, I'm in. Because it's just, you know, ceremony, rites of passage, something that I'm really passionate about, something that we need in our society. It's almost gone on a collective basis, but that's not to say individuals can't bring it back into the whole. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Jude. Charlemagne.
Hello, I'm Charlemagne. I'm in America, sometimes on the East Coast, sometimes on the West Coast. I have also been a person who's walked with the dying. So it's interesting that the three of us have been doing that work. It's been very important to me, and I started doing it actually almost accidentally as a child, because I didn't know enough to be afraid when a relative was sick and dying. And I felt such intense presence in that room. I felt compelled to be there to keep them company, because often, and this was back in the late 70s, often people would leave that room. People didn't want to be in that room. And I felt how lonely to be in that room alone. So that began that journey for me of paying attention to it with animals and with people on a small scale. And then later in life, as I came into an understanding of different cultural traditions, because that had always fascinated me as a child, that there were so many, whether it was the Egyptian rites of the dead, which were tremendously ornate and very, very beautiful, to rites in Mesoamerica and the indigenous on these lands here in America, in North America. But I've been a longtime ceremonialist, ritualist, a celebrant, because it became clear to me that that was the path that was most natural to me. So I spent a lot of time working at various esoteric and occult stores, and became a reader of astrology and tarot, and studied herbalism and aromatherapy, as well as meditation practices and yoga. And they all felt like they wove together so seamlessly and beautifully. And I kept being called upon to speak at different types of events, and similarly decided I'm clearly being called to be a celebrant, as well as someone who's just attending to these milestones and transition points in people's lives, as well as the lives of the non-human beings and the evolution of the planet and the collective consciousness that we share, that coherence in that heart field that we're all a part of. So I've loved doing ritual and spent a lot of time, particularly throughout the 90s, doing rituals specifically for young women, their menarche, first blood rituals, and then working with women and cronings, and just finding that there were so many ways to celebrate these various passages, whether it was a new baby, a new home, a new business. And so I've made a real life for myself. I feel very grateful. I've been able to make a real life for myself doing that work. And I love this discussion, because I think there are so many ways to engage. Ritual can be simple and it can be complex, but there's so many personal rituals that we have too. And if we start to maybe bring a sense of the sacred into daily life, then anything can be a ritual. So I'm thrilled to be part of this discussion today. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Charlemagne. Yeah, what you've just said has just like inspired me, the sacredness. Anyway, my name's SUNDY. I live in Yorkshire, up in the north of the country of England, and I'm a relationship coach, and I somehow I landed into becoming, my sort of interest area was around estrangement through the absence of my adult daughters being in my life for the past 16 years, maybe even a bit longer than that. And I'm not a ritual and ceremony practitioner, and the fact that I suppose what's interested me, why I'm here, is that I realized that when I was younger, perhaps I was a little bit more, I was raised on a farm, so I had that sort of sense of the seasons and the rituals and ceremonies that went with harvest time, and living in that farming community. And then as I moved more into what I would call sort of middle suburban mainstream, I lost all that connection, and I somehow lost, and I never realized that actually the ritual of menstruation and how I could have done that differently. And it just seemed to me that when I look back on my life, I missed so many rites of passages, so many watershed moments in my life where I could have marked it in some way. And I was really getting excited because I was 60, and it was in 2020 when I was 60. And we all know what happened in 2020. And I'd got a book, I'd got a venue, I'd got a gown planned, I'd got a whole range of things for me to step into my 60th, into my birthing, into my crone years. And it didn't happen. And it was still fun planning it. You know, I planned this ceremony, this rite of passage, where I was going to be given away. I don't know if that would be the right phrase, by somebody who was in the mother, and I was going to be received by the crone at the other side of this willow hoop that I had designed in my mind. And it, you know, like what you were saying, Charlemagne, about the sacredness, like anything can be a ritual. And I think for me, like, what I'm fascinated by is rituals bring you right bang into the moment. And I often don't live in the moment, and yet bringing somehow attention to making food. There's, like you're saying, there's so many rituals and ceremonies that we can participate in. And somehow it brings an awareness to it and a sense of, like, that word again, that sacredness. So I've wrote a few questions down, and the second one that I had was, well, maybe we expand on that. Do we even know, are aware of what are rituals in our day-to-day life? You know, like, do we have any practices? I'm talking about us here. Like, do we have any, do you have a ritual? Do you have a ceremony every day?
No, I don't think I do, actually, because my life is so precarious. I sort of I have weekly ritual. I go to a gong bath every week, and sometimes more than once a week. And that is like my spiritual downtime, if you like. That's for me, that's my healing. On a day-to-day basis, I suppose I have a cup of tea in bed every morning. That's my ritual. And then the day just takes over because of where I'm living and my circumstances. I do try and get a walk regularly in the forest. And again, that's quite ritualistic because it's the same route for 10 minutes regularly. But other than that, no, that's made me think about actually what could I do that I can fit in. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have any rituals. And it's something that when I hear other people talking about their rituals, and I know somebody who does Tai Chi every morning without fail at 7 o'clock, and she does a diary. I think I don't do anything. I don't even get out of bed at a regular time or go to bed at a regular time. And I think that's tied into not working as such. I retired from my full-time job around 6 years ago. And since that point, I have no routine whatsoever. And out of that routine, I just do what I like, when I like. And it's actually been quite liberating and quite freeing. However, over mainly this year, I started to miss having a bit of structure in my life. So over the last 6 years, I've done a lot of traveling. I've been to all sorts of festivals and events and retreats, and really indulge myself. There's no other word to describe it. Pure self-indulgence. But now I almost feel like I've gone back to the mindset that I was in when I left work, and quite enjoyed that routine of getting up and having breakfast and then putting on a uniform and then going to work, coming home, and I started to quite miss that. So part of me is now wanting to go back into the doing. And I've spent 6 years being, and it's been bliss, because it's quite a precious gift that certainly at my age, not a lot of people can do that. We have financial pressures on us. So I have really made the most of that, and I'm filled with gratitude for it. But I am looking just to go back into some structure. And I know that's not ritual as such, but with structure comes habits. And it's easier to then do things in particular orders, because there's an order to the day. So yeah, through not working, I just do whatever I feel like when I feel like, and that doesn't really include any rituals. I do things, but I wouldn't describe them as rituals. I journal a lot, but I wouldn't say I do that in a ritualistic way. If something's just coming through me, I feel compelled to write it down. If I'm just thinking about something, then I don't. So yeah, that's no rituals at the moment.
I would say my life is been going through a cycle of reevaluating the various rituals that have been a deep part of my life, because as life is changing, being really transparent, having finally come through what I feel like is the end of menopause, some of the things feel too much energy input, and time is very different. And I'm really feeling that right now in my life, just given a lot of the things that I've been called to do, whether it's classes that I'm teaching. I do ritual online. I lead moon circles and other types of things online, and have been doing that since, the pandemic brought that. So I used to do them in person, and then I was asked to do a lot of things online by both my community and then by a mystery school, who said, we'd love to hire you. Would you do it? And I really wasn't sure you could, but you can, I've discovered. But also my travels to other places have enriched my appreciation of how simple ritual can be, whether it's the first thing I do in the morning, where I just call myself back to myself, maybe write down my dreams, bless and give gratitude for that first glass of water, which is, in a world that's water tight, for clean water is a interesting thing. I think about gratitudes a lot, and how simple gratitude can be a ritual. I light a candle when I cook. I mean, there's a lot of thank you in my world, and just thank you can be a ritual. So I've got a very consistent set of things that are kind of like my little daily rhythm. And then there's other things that, as I'm looking at life right now from where I'm sitting, that I think are going to evolve. And so I think that's an important thing about ritual too. I think a lot of us come from different religious backgrounds, and that there might be ritual that we were steeped in. It may not have been called ritual or even ceremony, but it ultimately is. And what really fed us in a heart-centered and in a soul-centered manner that we can take, that is easy to become a very personalized ritual, whether it's blessing our food, our wine, our bread, whatever it is, as well as, you know, saying our gratitudes at night before we go to bed, and just acknowledging, like you said, walking through the woods, both of you mentioned it, you know, being in nature for me can be a ritual of just gratitude, the recognition of all that beauty and feeling like it fills me up. And what's the sacred reciprocity? What can I give back is always a question. So especially at this time of year, when we're looking at various traditions around end of life, dying and death is very traditional. We just passed these massive holidays that are really centered on the last harvest, rituals of the dying, acknowledgement of the ancestors. And so feeling that until like the calendar, the sacred wheel, like as we're moving from Samhain or All Hallows into Yule or solstice, so many things become apparent to me that could be ritualized easily and enjoyable to share. And I'd add that too, that there's the very personal ones, and there are the ones that are just easy to share, whether it's with friends, loved ones, the kids in my neighborhood. I taught them a lot about trick or treat this year, for example. Like, what is that? There's these like simple things we can do, and I try to make it fun where I can.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have a bit like you, Jackie. I have a regular, well, it's once a month I go to a fire ceremony, and that feels really lovely. It has its different flavors for each month, and the actual giving and receiving to the fire, you know, the actual making of the fire, and then I've just thought about, you know, doing a fire walk. You know, I have had the experience of doing one-offs like that, you know, that just bring that sense of wonderment to me. And today, and I wonder if it is more about an age thing for me, that as I get older, I keep looking for these little markers, and sometimes they come spontaneously. And it's definitely linked into gratitude, you know, in those moments where I suddenly feel connected, and I bring that sort of ritualistic feel to it. And today it is my middle daughter's birthday, and she's 40 years old, and there's something about having a nought at the end of your, you know, those when you get to 30, 40, whatever, 50, 60, it does feel like there's a marker, you know, it's the start of a new decade. And today, because she's not in my life, you know, and I did a little ceremony. I thought, how am I going to mark this day? So I took myself out for breakfast. I had a Bowen session this morning, which was just wonderful. And then took myself out for breakfast, and then put my boots on and walked in this beautiful walk that we used to do as a family. And took myself off to a building and went into the building where my own mother used to visit with her parents. So it felt like I was honoring so much and paying attention to today. And then I gathered up some, and ritual and ceremony, you actually don't need an awful lot. And you don't, it's like we tend to think it has to be big and we have to put gowns on, and, you know, and what from the conversations we're having here, it so isn't about that. It can be that, and it is that, but it's also doing it yourself, you know. So I picked up 2 or 3 things that I made meaning of, and then this river that I live by, that I was also further upstream, I put these offerings with words and feelings into the water, you know. And there's something about ritual that and ceremonies that's, for me, is very much about a letting go, but also at the same time it's an inviting in. So it covers, it sort of straddles, it is just that watershed moment. And I was thinking, on a daily basis, you know, most days I'll put some oil on my body in the morning. And some mornings it's like I'll just slap it on. And then other mornings I'm actually in a ritual with I'm communing with my body, and I'll put it on with attention, and you can put hand cream on in that sort of way. I think for me, what I'm hearing myself say, and I haven't rehearsed any of this, it's coming out in the moment. What I'm seeing for me is rituals very much about bringing me into presence. And I'm sure it's other things as well. And that's the focus for me at the moment, that those moments where I'm doing something. And it's interesting because I've heard, we've said it brings routine and structure. And there's something very grounding and comforting in that. It's like, I know people have prayer beads and things, and there's something comforting about anchoring for a moment into something that's ritualistic. And we talked about rhythm, and then we gratitude. But I also wonder what's the difference between a ritual and a habit, and I think for me it's about presence. I don't know if anybody's got a different take on that.
Yeah, I would agree. And something else that's just struck me then as you were talking about going to the place you visited with your mum and your grandparents, there's an ancestral link as well, isn't there, to ritual? It's bringing in that wisdom and the energy of that ancestral line and honouring that part of the ritual. And I guess sometimes you get into a tradition through things that have always been done in that way. And you also were talking about fire and bonfire, and I saw something the other day that I just wanted to share, because I watched a documentary about Guy Fawkes and bonfire night. I don't know if you have anything to do with that over there in the US, Charlemagne. And they right at the very end of it, they were saying that we could so easily have he could have been successful and blown up Parliament, and we would be a Catholic nation, and who knows how we would be, with all that. But because we didn't, the country celebrated every year with a bonfire, and it became a ritual or a ceremony that every district would have a bonfire, and that's how it came to known as bonfire night. And I thought that's kind of interesting. So that was originally a ritual, and now it's a big event with fireworks and the whole shebang going on. But I found that kind of interesting, sort of fed into the ritual side of why we celebrate bonfire night.
And it's changed, that ritual ceremony, whatever you want to call it, has changed in my lifetime. I'm sure you.
Yeah, absolutely.
People used to make a guy, and we used to wheel it out in penny for the guy and stuff.
Yeah, have things in the back garden.
Used to throw it on the fire, which is so quite.
Yeah. Yeah, which around the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, they did burn the guy for that reason, because he wasn't successful in blowing up Parliament, and they were all very pleased about that. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it?
It is. Another question?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we talk a little bit about transition and what that actually means, and how ceremony and ritual can assist. And maybe, have we lost? Because I often think, I work in the world of grief as well. I do grief foundation courses in grief, and when we look at past losses, for every gain that there is in life, there's a loss, and some people wouldn't think that getting married, there wouldn't be so much focus on what you're losing when you get married. The focus is obviously on what you're gaining. But actually, when I look back, there was a lot of loss. And so those transitions, maybe we could imagine some up here, what perhaps do we want to bring forth in these transition periods? What, if we've got any ideas, what is it about transitions, and because most people find them difficult. Change is difficult. And just wondering how ritual ceremony and transitions can help.
I went to a gathering of women, not last year, the year before, and there was lots of workshops, and one of them was a menarche ceremony, which I'd never actually heard of. And each time there was a workshop, Andrea came round and tinkled a little bell, and she said, "Are you coming to this one?" I said, "What is it?" And she said, "It's a menarche ceremony." And I said, "I don't know what that is." So she explained to me, and I said, "Well, I'm a bit old for that." And she said, no, she said, "Never too old, never too old." I went, okay. And curiosity took me into the ceremony. And oh my goodness, it's never too late to go through the rites of passage for transition. It really doesn't matter how old we are. Better late than never sort of springs to mind. And for anybody who's watching who doesn't know what that ceremony is, it's a transition, it's a rite of passage that takes us as female of the species from childhood into womanhood. And it's celebrated with our first bleed, or just after our first bleed. And all this was quite new to me. And I'm thinking, how did I get to the age of, 59 years old and not actually know about this? And, huge discussions ensued after, but for the actual ceremony, there was around 50 of us. So it's quite a short ceremony. It wasn't a tailor-made ceremony for each and every one of us. It was so emotional. And that the age range was from 20 up to 70. And we were asked as part of the ceremony what we have brought with us to give up in order to become, from our childhood, in order to become a woman. And that really hit me, just that simple question. It was, oh my goodness, this is, because I've always wondered what the mysteries around rites of passage and initiation were. I've always been curious about that, but never come close to actually finding out. But as soon as this question was asked of me, I knew I was going to go away and have a real long, deep think, because it's that question that puts the meaning into it, We have to let go of something in order to open up the new space. Otherwise, without that, there is a very real danger that we can literally get stuck in childhood. We can fail to make that transition because of fear or shame or lack of knowledge, or nobody's telling us it's a cause for celebration. It's just something that's happening. And as young teenage girls, we don't really know what's happening. Then the adult door opens into life and we're more or less pushed out of it, completely ill-equipped. So the wounding starts. And then by the time we've caught up with ourselves, we're trying to deal with all our issues coming from a very wounded place. So it really highlighted the importance of those rites of passage to equip us to deal with the next phase of our lives. And that includes everything. That includes going into motherhood, to elderhood, to ancestorhood. They're all part and parcel of the whole journey through life. But, we do ourselves a great disservice by not having them, or we're unintentionally unaware of them. And then when we do become aware, we're like, oh my goodness. So for me, that ceremony was tinged with sorrow, the fact that I was never really going to have the opportunity to connect to my blood or to my body or to my feminine self. And I've spent many years in denial of my feminine and lived very much in my masculine, because I just didn't really know how to get in touch with my feminine. But it was also filled with great joy, because the joy on the younger women's faces who were going through this ceremony. And it was like, oh, you lucky women, you know, you've got the power now within you to celebrate your essence, your body, the miracle of your body, you know, the life itself. So while I was quite sorrowful for the fact that I never could, I very also quickly realized this is great knowledge, because I've got two great nieces who I can now pass something worthwhile on. So that's what it's never too late, because once we have the knowledge, we can use that, we can pass it on. But the joy on the younger women's faces of just going through this ceremonial rite of passage of deep connection, and their feminine, it was priceless, you know. So ceremony all the way.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
so
really.
nice to bring that into the conscious world and hold that ceremony around it, isn't it? And you've just reminded me, Jude, that for me it must have happened on a subconscious level when I got to menarche, or around that time. I was 10, 11, I was 11 when I started menarche, and around that age my dad made me clear out my toy cupboard. So my connection with my childhood, I had to let go of something that represented my childhood, but he didn't know what was happening, and I certainly didn't, because I was too young. But thinking about it now, I let go of all those things that represented my childhood as I was about to move into womanhood. So that's really interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
How
I think
did you feel about that, though? Were you reluctant to let go?
Yeah, I was really angry. I was really cross. Yeah, I didn't want to let go of my toys. My toys.
Got my
Had that been done in a very different context and ceremonial way,
Yeah.
you could have owned it, sort of embodied it, embraced it, considered it.
It's funny, you know, I sort of have a bit of empathy for your father, because he probably knew himself that my daughter is now a woman. So there'd be something that, like you were saying, on that unconscious level, that, and so his loss, you know, his baby daughter's now not a baby daughter anymore, and he doesn't hiding. So get rid of your toys.
That's a really interesting point about, our parents almost grieving the loss of our childhood as well. I've never considered that. You know, parents saying goodbye to their children.
That's why mothers cry at weddings.
Well, that's weddings, well, you know, as our that's where the initiation come in, didn't it? It was also probably because you never read or hear about the parents' role, and how they feel about the initiation. But is it also an opportunity for them to acknowledge the little children, and embrace the adults as well? It's just, I've never considered it from that angle.
I've actually made a point to make that a part of when I've facilitated those rituals, which is to, if the young girl is open to it, I ask her if she would like any of her female relatives to partake and have a role in the ritual, because I feel that it's really important, because it does exactly what you're speaking to for those who've never honored their bloods, and that transition from childhood to womanhood, it can be profoundly healing. And I love that. So I've had rituals that I've done for young women where their mothers are there and their grandmothers are there, and maybe a great aunt is there, and it's phenomenal. And then elder women who are part of their community come. There's a whole variety of ways I've done it, but I think that we've also touched on something that I think is really important not to overlook, which is that a lot of the rights of women in particular around things that are hard, like when you think about menstruation, it is usually swept under the rug. It's made to be invisible, and yet it can be a profound step into great power and self-knowledge, adulthood, autonomy. And as women, how often have we been granted that type of honoring, whether it was from the other women in our life, as well as the men in our lives. And so I love the story that you tell about the toys, because I think you're right. I think there was something very subliminal, potentially, of grief for that person, you know, as he looked at his daughter and acknowledged, this is no longer my baby girl, in the same way that other change will be coming. And I also think that, again, we live in, I'm just going to call it out, we do live in a strongly patriarchal culture worldwide. And so the variety of celebrations, whether it's menarche or a croning, think about how elder women are often pushed aside. We're not celebrated in the same way as younger, vivacious, childbearing women. It's very different. And yet we can flip that script if we choose.
And
And that I think is deeply empowering and greatly important. And I think it's a reason to have certain types of rituals, because I love that you were going to do it Sunday. You know, perhaps we should all do it. We should have a group croning and crowning.
Maybe we should, and maybe we should, like, the menopause is another thing that is like, and that's actually such an empowering time, but because it's been medicalized and it's like something that we have to get through, and it's like got this really bad press, but actually it is a wonderful transition time. When I was going through the menopause, what I think would be a wonderful ceremony for a menopausal woman is for a whole year to exit your life, leave it, go into some menopausal space where you are served, waited on hand and foot, nourished, looked after. You get to practice receiving, which is what we're going to have to do as we get older. We're going to be able to be looked after at some point in our life. We might as well get used to it.
And we can do it joyfully, right?
Lots of us are sort of like really quite so independent, so capable, so masculine that we struggle to receive. So there's something around the menopause time where we could, and I would have loved that. I so it was burning in my brain. I need a year out, just away from everybody and everything, my life. It probably would have been very scary, but there was a part of me that really wanted to do it. What came to me was what you were saying, like Charlemagne, and what you were saying, Jude, as well, like the elderhood. Like the silver tent is all about us becoming those elders that we long for, those women. And these conversations are really helping us to do that, you know, so that we can claim our heritage, you know, this wisdom years, instead of disappearing like so many of our previous generations of elders have, due to the patriarchal system, due to us not having a voice. So I think it's really important that we have these conversations around these types of things. And I also want to bring in here, you know, like, especially in the UK here, we've lost touch with our cultural heritage, you know, our own plants, our own rhythms. Everybody seems to be, it's rush, rush, rush. And I think that's part of the problem. We don't have so many of those stop moments, those ceremonial stop moments, reclaiming our own land medicine again in the UK. And that's Sharon Blackie, If Women Rose Rooted. You know, it's sort of like a little bit of a nice little Bible to get us reconnected back to our geography and our particular areas where that we can use those materials for our ceremonies and our ritual practice.
I really like that you're bringing that up, and I would say it's a really interesting thing in America because we're all mutts. We're all either mutts, you know, or we're a combination of different ancestry, or we are apart from our ancestral lands unless you are indigenous. And so there's a continual longing, I think, among people here for some type of tradition, what you're speaking to. And yet none of us here, again, unless you're indigenous born, can claim the land. And so there's an interesting thing going on here that I've been witnessing for the last 20 years or so, of people starting to really look at where do they come from. And there's been a rise in things like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, where you can actually find out, because so many people don't know, partially because many people fled their countries of origin due to persecution or any number of poor opportunity, whatever it was. And so many traditions were lost to time, and to those who passed away who may have held those traditions very strongly. And so unless we knew those people, or they wrote them down or shared them with their descendants, they're gone. So I really, really appreciate what you're saying there, because I feel like the more people actually looked to their own ancestry and came to understand the beauty and the power of those traditions and what they could mean, and brought them into their homes and into their hearts, it might resonate more than the grabbing and the cultural appropriation, which is very problematic, which I also witness, of people not honoring the traditions and the rituals of other people and just taking them and using them as they want to, without any without sacred reciprocity. For myself, having studied with different teachers in different parts of the world, honoring that at the very least is saying where this came from, where this teaching came from, where I learned it, how I was gifted with it, and if I'm allowed or not allowed to share it. And there's some things I'm not allowed to share, but I feel very, very satisfied with the fact that I was granted permission to even partake from someone whose tradition runs hundreds of thousands, if not thousands of years old. So there's that too.
Yeah, what you were just saying about connection to ancestors. I remember the first time somebody asked me to introduce myself and then state my mother's name and my grandmother's name. And very often I'll run it over in my head and the power. But when you say, hi, my name is Jude, there's not much weight and there's not much power in that. There is, but when you say, my name is Jude, I am the daughter of, you can start to feel in your body the grounding and the gravitas that automatically comes. I am the granddaughter of Joan, the great granddaughter of, I don't know my great grandmother's name. But as you say it, you can feel the power and the sovereignty and the strength of your individual self. And it also really starts to root you into the land of where you're from. And that forms connection and a real sense of belonging, of your place on this earth. And without that, we don't really know our place. We don't have that deep-rooted connection either to the earth or to self. And the stronger that we're connected to self, the more in our power that we become, and with that power, the more good that we can put out into the world. So yeah, thanks for touching on that, because that just reminded me of that. My name is Jude and I am the daughter of, and I teach that to my nieces and my nephews, and they giggle and they laugh. But things like that, don't forget, they're not forgotten. They do go in.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a few minutes left, and I just wondered if what is the next ceremony or ritual that you are participating in or want to participate in? This has come totally left field. Or what is it that you feel moved to do around ritual and ceremony? I'm hearing, Jude, that you're already passing it on to next generations, this sort of awareness around all of this. It's how can we spread the word? How could we be advocates for this, you know? And also, what is it we ourselves want to develop for ourselves in our families and also our own lives?
I'll make it quick because I have been talking for the last few minutes. For me, I have a very keen interest in attending grief ceremonies, but also with a view to setting up my own grief ceremonies, grief rituals. I already run a grief cafe, which is a very formal discussion group. We talk about grief. But I would like to take that further and explore that a lot more, because we all suffer from grief. So, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of food for thought there. I guess I've got two things I want to perhaps look at. My daughter's expecting her first baby in February, so I'm thinking about bringing her, creating some ritual around motherhood. I'm going to give that some thought. Yeah, bringing her into
Grandmotherhood, is it your first grandchild?
No, it's my third.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, there may be something there I can think about. It's her first. So, and creating some sort of around the celebrant work that I'm doing. There's so many rituals out there. If you go online and look things up, there's so many. So maybe it's for me creating my own to
Yeah.
bring into the ceremony that I'm taking, and or suggesting it to the people I'm doing it for. Yeah.
What a
Yeah.
lovely creative field that is.
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah. And I have been told, I've been studying the gene keys, and one of the things that's come up for me is that I will be doing something at some point that nobody has thought of yet. Watch this space. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would still love to have a crown ceremony at some point. And I'm also thinking as well, I did some shamanic work years ago, and when you hit 70, there's this quest where you go into you get put into a little cave, and you have somebody who comes and feeds you and looks after you, and for 2 or 3 nights, and you do your vision quest, and that quite intrigues me. It'll have to be warm, and it'll have to have a bed in it if it's a cave.
Is that known as incubation? Is that known as incubation?
Don't know, but it could be.
Yeah.
But
I know the ancient Greeks had a practice of, and they called it incubation, which was pre-Plato, where they lay in a cave and stayed there for as long as necessary in order to connect.
Yeah, it sounds lovely. I think my vision is that I go out with a big staff. In fact, I've got it here. You can't see. I've got my crone staff behind me, and walk the land and do my visioning for the next part of my life. When I'm 70. But I think I have to get dressed up in some sort of ceremonial
Oh yes,
thing.
Yeah.
Make it
65.
fabulous.
definitely.
Yeah.
And also on for me, it's a practice in bringing it in every day, and remembering that actually breathing is a ritual, and it's like just bringing that. And I love that word, that reciprocity. It took me a while to get to say it, Charlemagne, but it's a beautiful word, the reciprocity of giving and receiving. And yeah.
It's that creating of equilibrium, right? I also started using very different language around give and take. I don't like give and take. It feels tit for tat. I don't like it. I say, here's what I have to offer. Here's what I can receive.
Yeah, nice.
Feels really different, right?
Mm.
So in that spirit, the immediate rituals, one is very unexpected, and very suddenly I have to participate in a funerary and an honoring of life celebration on Sunday. And then Monday for my students, I have a new moon ritual. So those are the immediate things right now. And then the ongoing thing of the ritual of setting up my life and checking in with the new rhythms, like really, what do I want to do? Thinking about how I want this winter to be very different than the last few winters, which were so isolating. And but the beauty of the winter holidays is about bringing light into the darkest time of the year. And how do I want to do that this year? So I've been thinking about that, and about the elements, right? So it's the deepest time, it's elemental earth, and yet I want to bring that warmth of fire and that soothingness of water, of cleansing and anointing. And then the beauty of air, I make incense, and I do a lot of anointing stuff. But also that, exactly, as a meditation teacher and a yoga teacher, we focus on the breath so much, and that simple act of connecting to all the elements in our physicality and in our outer world and the inner world, and where is that meeting place? It's so intimate, it's so close and so beautiful. How can we engage it more in a simple and yet really beautiful way? I think about that a lot.
Yeah, and I'd like to add in there, you know, be a bit more vocal about these types of things. But there seems to be so much for us elders to be busy with.
I was just picking up there, you mentioned getting dressed up, and there's something about ceremonial robes. And my sister had you remember the Scottish Widows advert where she had the big black cape with the lining and the big hood and it was flapping in the wind? My sister had a cape like that, and the minute you put it on, your energy changed. It was like you were going into some sort of other world, as it were. You're stepping through that barrier, and you brought a different energy. So the getting dressed up when you're doing a ritual, I think, is quite important. And whatever it is, would be different for everybody. You do step into that different persona, don't you? And I was quite not cross with my sister, but she got rid of that cloak because she never wore it. I would have had it. Yeah, I think that's part of it. And again, when I go to a wedding, after the last 3 years of hardly going anywhere and slopping around in slacks and a baggy jumper, to suddenly go to weddings and get dressed up again, that was just felt amazing. Put on a bit of makeup, do my hair, all part of the getting ready for something's about to happen. You know, this is exciting. So that, yeah, definitely
Isn't that a ritual in itself, though? If you
Yeah,
think about it, like the bathing, it's a
absolutely.
purification, and then we're adorning, maybe
Yeah.
anointing. We're dressing in things that bring us into that present space where we know we feel in alignment with what the energy is that we need to do and want to do.
Yeah,
So I think the whole thing,
absolutely.
the whole preparation
Mm.
is transforming and can be, and we can make it more and more and more depending on how far we want to go with it. I mean, there's times I used to do a lot of larger rituals with a group that I was a part of for many years where there were hundreds of people. And so there was a little bit of a theatrical element to it.
Mm.
And it was marvelous because you really were holding down that energy and calling in the particular archetype that you wanted to represent.
Yeah.
I mean, you can take it so far. It's fabulous.
Mm.
I would like a new word for namaste, you know, something. Is it the God in me sees the God in you, you know, and how this is a symbol of ritual. And as we come to the close here, I don't quite know how to close it because it feels like we've had a ceremony on ceremony. And maybe, I don't know, have you got a word that you would like to end on, or a phrase?
Mm.
I don't know why Dave Allen has sprung into my mind. You remember Dave Allen?
Yeah.
It's something like, good night, God bless, and may your God go with you.
Yeah.
That'd be mine. Anybody else want to add anything?
I think I would just like to say thank you for watching. I'd like to think most people would agree with what we've spoken about of the power and the importance of ritual. And it's up to us individually and collectively to put it back into our lives if that's what we want. And I think anybody who's ever took part in any kind of group ritual or gathering knows the power and the uplift and the joy that it can bring. So yeah, let's bring back ritual ceremony.
Thank you, Jude. Are we complete?
I guess there's one thing I feel is important to drop in,
Go on then.
and it's a little thing from the Wizard of Oz, which is at the very end of the journey that Dorothy makes, which is a heroine's journey, if you look at it, right? Glinda says to her, you have the power in you all the time. And I really feel like that's an important thing to leave with. We have the power in us all the time to commune with the sacred within and without. And how beautiful is that? You just claim it. Just do it.
Agreed.
Any last words, Jackie?
No, the only thing that's coming to me is a phrase I've got on my website, which is to have joy in one's life, one must share it.
Beautiful.
That's, yeah.
Well, thank you ever so much, everybody who's watched Silver Tent TV on rituals and ceremonies. And if you haven't managed to watch this fully, you can catch it on YouTube if you are watching it live in Silver Tent. And thank you for watching, and bye for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.